When night falls and sound withdraws, the archive remains. The night is long, the air is still. Only what must continue, continues. The machine at the far end is still running. The drum turns at the rate the cycle requires, not fast, at this stage, the wash cycle rather than the spin. The drum moving the load through the water rather than throwing the water out of the load. From outside the glass door, the motion is visible as a slow rotation, the fabric inside rising on one side as the drum lifts it, falling on the other as gravity takes it back, the load folding and unfolding with each revolution in the patterns that the drum's geometry and the load's weight and the water's resistance together produce. No one is watching it. The other machines are finished. Their doors are closed, their drums still, the loads inside them at whatever state the completed cycle left them. Damp, compressed by the final spin, holding the heat that the hot water put into the fiber and that the fiber has not yet released. The machines that are done do not announce their completion. They are simply stopped, their indicator lights holding a steady color that means the same thing. The cycle is over, the door can be opened, the load is ready to be moved. The drum turns and the fabric does not fold the same way twice. Each revolution begins with the fabric at the position the previous revolution left it. A different configuration of folds and contacts than it was a revolution ago. The weight redistributed by the fall. The wet fabric taking a shape that the next lift will begin to undo. The geometry of the drum, the baffles on the inner wall, the shallow paddles that catch the fabric and carry it upward before releasing it, determines the range of the motion without determining the exact position at each moment. The fabric finds its own configuration within the space the drum provides, and the configuration is always specific, always temporary, always resolved by the next revolution into something different. The water moves with it, hot, carrying the detergent that was added at the start, holding in suspension what the fabric has so far given up. The water does not stay in one place in the drum. It moves with the fabric, through the fabric, across the fabric, the drum's rotation driving a circulation that brings different portions of the water into contact with different portions of the fabric at each moment. The fabric is in the water is in the fabric. The boundary between them at the scale of the fiber is not a boundary at all. The floor of this room is slightly damp near the machines, not from a leak, from the moisture that the open doors release when loads are transferred, from the steam that escapes when a cycle ends and the door is opened before the drum has cooled, from the general humidity that a room containing many machines working with hot water accumulates over the course of a day. By morning, the floor will be dry. At this hour, it holds what the day's use left on it. Breath enters, breath leaves. Between breaths, the air holds its density. Inside the running drum, the fabric moves through water. The water is hot, not boiling, but elevated above the temperature of the room by the heating element that brought it to the set temperature before the drum began to turn. The heat is in the water now, and the water is in contact with the fabric, and the fabric is receiving the heat through the surfaces where the two are in contact. which is most of the fabric surface, which is nearly all of it. Cotton fiber is cellulose, the same structural polymer that gives paper its strength, present here not as a compressed sheet, but as a twisted bundle. The individual molecular chains wound together into a fiber, the fiber wound with other fibers into a thread, the thread woven or knitted with other threads into a cloth. The structure is the same material at different scales of organization: molecular chain, fiber, thread, cloth. Each level of organization contributing something to the properties of the whole. In hot water, the fiber swells. The cellulose chains have sites along their length where water molecules attach, where the chemistry of the cellulose and the chemistry of water are compatible, where the water finds the fiber and the fiber receives the water. In dry air, these sites are occupied by nothing. The chains close to each other, the fiber compact. In water, the sites fill. Water molecules entering the structure of the fiber, the chains pushed apart by the water between them, the fiber diameter increasing as the water takes up the space the chains had held between themselves. The thread swells with the fiber. As each fiber in the thread expands, the thread expands. The bundle of fibers pressed against each other by the twist that holds the thread together now pressed with more force. The twist tightening slightly as the individual fibers push outward against it. The cloth changes with the thread. The weave tightens as the swollen threads fill the gaps between them. The geometry of the cloth becoming denser, the spaces between the threads smaller than they were when the cloth was dry. Between the threads, the water reaches what the threads hold. The particles that the fabric has collected since its last wash, the ones lodged in the spaces between fibers, the ones adhering to the fiber surface, the ones that the mechanical action of the drum and the chemistry of the detergent together work loose. These are what the wash cycle is for. The hot water loosens the bonds between the particles and the fiber. The mechanical action of the drum, the folding and unfolding, the impact of the fabric against the drum wall, the turbulence of the water moving through the load, provides the force to move the loosened particles away from the fiber surface and into the water. The fabric gives up what it has been holding. Not all of it, what is bonded deeply into the fiber structure, what has had time to become part of the fiber rather than a deposit on it, stays. What is at the surface, what the hot water can reach and the motion can dislodge, moves into the water. The water carries it. The drum turns. The water that is now carrying what the fabric gave up will be removed when the cycle reaches the rinse and drain, replaced with clean water, which will carry away what remains, which will be drained in turn. The fabric that comes out of the wash is not the same fabric that went in. Not in any way the hand would identify as different. The weave is the same, the color is the same, the weight is nearly the same. Different in the fiber. The particles that the wash removed are gone. The sites in the fiber structure where they were lodged now open. The surface of each fiber closer to its own composition than it was before the water and the heat and the motion reached it. The fabric is more itself after the wash than it was before, in the sense that what was in the fiber and wasn't fiber has been reduced. What remains is more purely the material the fabric was made of. True wisdom cannot be captured in words. It is found only in the silence between them. The glass door is opaque with condensation. From outside, the interior of the drum is visible only as shapes moving behind a film. The fabric rising and falling, the water catching the light in the brief moment before it is swallowed by the next revolution, the steam that forms at the water's surface, collecting at the top of the drum and moving toward the door where the temperature is lower. The glass is cooler than the air inside. Where the steam contacts the glass, it gives up its heat and becomes water, a film forming on the inner surface, thickening with each revolution of the drum, running in slow lines toward the bottom of the door. The condensation is the heat made liquid. The steam carried the heat from the water to the glass. The glass took the heat and released the water. What runs down the inner surface of the door is the record of the transfer. The energy that was in the hot water moved first into the air as steam, then into the glass, the water that carried the energy deposited at the point of transfer. The glass is warm where the condensation is thickest. The warmth is what arrived with the steam before the steam became the film. From outside the glass, the shapes are indistinct. The film is not uniform. It is thicker where the steam has been arriving longest, thinner near the edges of the door where the glass is closer to the temperature of the room. Through the thicker portions, nothing is visible except light and movement, the fabric reduced to a shifting brightness, the water to a glint. Through the thinner portions, near the edge, the interior is more legible. A section of drum wall, a fold of fabric, the color of the cloth moving through its arc. The full picture is not available from any single point of view. The condensation that obscures the center is the consequence of the heat that the cycle requires. A cooler wash would leave the glass clearer. The opacity is not incidental. It is the record of the temperature the water was brought to, deposited on the glass at the boundary where the temperature of the inside meets the temperature of the outside. The drum turns behind it. The fabric moves. The glass holds what the heat left there. Breath enters. Breath leaves. Between breaths, the air holds its density. The cycle changes. The drum slows, the wash motion ending, the water beginning to drain. What was in the water? What the fabric gave up during the wash? What the detergent loosened and the motion carried away? Leaves with the water through the drain at the base of the machine. The drum begins to turn again, faster than before, the motion different. No longer the slow folding and unfolding of the wash, but a rapid rotation building toward the speed at which the centrifugal force exceeds the water's hold on the fiber. At that speed, the water moves outward. The fiber is held against the drum wall by the rotation, pressed outward by the same force that presses everything outward in a rotating frame. The water in the fiber, less fixed to the structure than the fiber itself, moves outward through the fiber under the same force, traveling from the interior of each thread toward the surface, from the surface into the space between the thread and the drum wall, and through the perforations in the drum wall into the outer casing, and from there to the drain. The fiber compresses as the water leaves. The swelling that the hot water produced. The fiber diameter increased. The threads expanded. The weave tightened. Begins to reverse as the water is removed. The cellulose sites that the water occupied release it under the centrifugal force. The chains that the water had pushed apart move toward each other as the water between them thins. The fiber contracts. The thread contracts. The cloth, still pressed against the drum wall by the rotation, becomes denser as the water that had expanded it is pressed out. The fabric has received the water and given it back. Not completely. The spin cycle removes most of the water, but not all. What remains in the fiber after the spin is the water that the centrifugal force was not sufficient to remove. The water held most tightly by the cellulose, deepest in the fiber structure, in the sites where the bond between the water molecule and the chain is strongest. This water will leave when the fabric dries, evaporating slowly at the rate the temperature and humidity of the drying environment allow. The spin cycle has done what it can. The rest requires time and air. The fabric that has been through the spin is different from the fabric that entered the wash. It has been wet and is now less wet. It has been loose in water and is now compressed against itself. It has been hot and is now cooling. At the rate the fiber and the remaining water and the drum wall allow. The cycle has moved through several states, wet and turning, hot and turbulent, pressed and centrifuged, and the fabric has followed each state, receiving what each required of it, its current condition, the accumulated result of all of them. True wisdom cannot be captured in words. It is found only in the silence between them. The machine at the far end has stopped. The drum is still. The indicator light holds its steady color. The fabric inside is at the state the completed cycle left it, damp, compressed against itself by the final spin, warm from the water that heated it, and that the spin removed only partially. The heat that remains is the heat the fiber absorbed and has not yet released. The warmth present in the cloth, the way warmth is present in any material that has been heated and has not had time to cool. The fabric is not dry. The water still in the fiber is the water the spin could not remove. The water most tightly held, deepest in the structure, present in the cellulose at the sites where the bond is strongest. This water is not available to the air the way the surface water was available. It is inside the fiber, held there, waiting not because it anticipates release, but because the conditions for its release, air circulation, temperature, time, have not yet arrived. The fabric in the drum is different from the fabric that went in. Not visibly in most of what matters to the eye. The color is the same, the weave is the same, the thread count is the same. Different in the fiber. The particles that the wash cycle removed are gone. The sites where they were lodged now empty. The fiber surface closer to its own composition than it was before the wash. Different in the water content. Damp rather than dry. The remaining moisture distributed through the fiber at the concentration the spin left it at. Different in the heat. Warm from the cycle. The temperature of the fiber above the temperature of the room. The warmth moving outward toward the air at the rate the fiber's conductivity and the room's temperature allow. The machine ran its cycle. The cycle is in the cloth. Breath enters, breath leaves. Between breaths, the air holds its density. The other machines are also still. Their loads are in the same state. Warm, damp, the cycles that ran through them completed. The results of those cycles held in the fiber. The room is quiet now, in a way it was not an hour ago, when the drums were turning and the water was moving, and the mechanical sounds of several cycles at different stages filled the space. The sounds have stopped. What the sounds were producing has not stopped. It is in the fabric, in the warmth, in the water still held in the fiber of each load in each still drum. The fluorescent lights run above all of it. The change machine holds its coins. The folding tables are empty. The plastic chairs face the machines at the angle they were left at, which is the angle that someone sitting in them and watching a drum turn would arrange them. No one is sitting in them. The drums are not turning. The fabric in each drum holds what the cycle put into it: the heat, the remaining water, the absence of what the water carried away, and will hold it until a hand opens the door and the morning takes it. True wisdom cannot be captured in words. It is found only in the silence between them. Breath enters, breath leaves. Between breaths, the air holds its density. When night falls, the archive remains.